So, let me tell you about the day I stopped believing everything my species thought we knew about warfare, biology, and the very concept of when something should just have the decency to die. My name is Voran. No, I do not care if you can pronounce it. I am a tactical observer for the Galactic Council, which is basically a fancy way of saying I get paid to watch other species fight wars and file reports that no one reads. For 300 cycles, I have watched battles across 47 systems, and I have seen empires fall. I have witnessed last stands that would make your sensory organs weep. I thought, quite foolishly as it turns out, that I had seen everything. Then I met the humans. More specifically, then I met Sergeant Jake Holloway, and my entire understanding of reality decided to pack its bags and go on vacation. It started on a planet called Draxus 9, a miserable ball of red sand and volcanic activity that nobody wanted, but everybody was fighting over because it sat on a strategic hyperspace lane. The Crin Dominion had decided this rock was worth dying for, though the human forces disagreed. I was there to observe and document, because apparently the Council wanted to see how these new species, these humans, handled real combat. The briefing I received about humans was, let us say, underwhelming. Bipedal mammals from a death world, moderate physical capabilities, notable for pack bonding and irrational persistence. That last part should have been in bigger font, maybe with flashing lights, perhaps an alarm. I was embedded with the Crin forces, observing from their command post. The Crin are professional soldiers, scaled and efficient with centuries of military doctrine. They outnumbered the human contingent 3-1. They had better weapons, better armor, better everything. This was supposed to be a quick operation. Secure the valley, eliminate the human garrison, move on. The human base was a collection of prefabricated structures huddled in a canyon, maybe 200 soldiers total. The Crin general, a scarred veteran named Theeks, was already planning his victory speech. "They will break within the first assault," Theeks told me, his tail swishing with confidence. "Mammals always do. Too emotional, too fragile." I nodded, made notes, and prepared to watch another predictable battle. Oh, how wrong we were. How spectacularly, impossibly wrong. And the attack began at dawn. Crin artillery hammered the human positions, turning the prefab structures into twisted metal. The shelling went on for 2 hours. Nothing could survive that bombardment. Nothing should have survived. I watched the readouts, saw the temperatures in that valley spike high enough to melt steel, and I started composing the report in my head. Human resistance eliminated in opening barrage. Expected outcome. Then the shelling stopped, and the Crin ground forces advanced. That is when the shooting started. The humans were still there, still alive, still fighting. They came boiling out of bunkers and collapsed buildings like angry insects from a disturbed nest, and they were absolutely furious about being shelled for 2 hours. Who knew mammals could hold grudges so efficiently? I watched through the observation screens as human soldiers, these supposedly fragile creatures, engaged in firefights with Crin troops who outweighed them by 50 kilograms. The humans did not fight like any species I had documented. They did not fall back to defensible positions. They did not attempt to preserve their forces. They attacked. They actually attacked while outnumbered, while outgunned, while their base was still on fire around them. "This is illogical," I muttered, making frantic notes. Theeks looked concerned for the first time. "They should be retreating. Why are they advancing?" Because, as I would learn, humans do not read the manual on how they are supposed to behave. The fighting was brutal. The Crin were trained, disciplined, and professional. The humans were none of these things. They were creative, unpredictable, and apparently operating on spite and caffeine. I watched one human soldier, yes, it was Holloway, though I did not know his name yet, use a damaged hover vehicle as a mobile barricade, pushing it forward while his squad advanced, behind it, firing the entire time. The Crin tried to flank them. Holloway, without any apparent concern for military doctrine or his own survival, grabbed what looked like an explosive charge, sprinted directly at the flanking force, and threw it into their midst. The explosion sent Crin soldiers flying. Holloway did not even slow down. He just kept running, shooting, and apparently having the time of his life. "These creatures are insane," Theeks said, and I had to agree. The battle raged for 6 hours. 6 hours of humans refusing to do what they were supposed to do, which was die. They held that valley through sheer stubbornness and what I can only describe as weaponized audacity. The Crin finally fell back to regroup, and I transmitted my initial report. Human forces demonstrate unexpected resilience and aggression.
position. Casualties significant, but morale remains high. Further observation required. What I should have written was, send help, these mammals are terrifying. The next assault came 3 days later. The Crin had reinforced, brought up heavier weapons, and were determined to end this embarrassment. I was still with them, still documenting, still trying to understand what I was seeing. The humans had reinforced too, somehow getting supplies through the Crin blockade. Don't ask me how. Every time I thought I understood human capabilities, they did something else impossible. The second battle made the first one look like a friendly disagreement. The Crin came in with armor support, heavy walkers that could punch through fortifications. The humans responded with shoulder-fired missiles, improvised explosives, and in one memorable case, a human soldier who somehow climbed onto a walker and started pulling panels off until he could drop grenades inside. That was Holloway again. I was starting to recognize his particular brand of crazy. He was, I noted, a sergeant. His squad followed him with the kind of loyalty that I had only seen in species with biological pack bonds. Humans, I was learning, formed these bonds with everyone, their squad, their unit, their species. They pack bonded with their weapons, for crying out loud. I watched Holloway pat his rifle like it was a pet. The fighting concentrated around a ridge that overlooked the main human position. Whoever held that ridge controlled the valley. The Crin knew it, the humans knew it. It became the focal point of everything. Holloway's squad was assigned to hold the ridge, 12 humans against repeated Crin assaults. I watched through the drone feeds, documenting what I was certain would be their last stand. They held for 2 days. 2 days of constant attacks, no sleep, limited supplies, and these mammals just kept fighting. They took casualties, they ran out of ammunition and started using Crin weapons. They ran out of those and started throwing rocks. Actual rocks. One human, a woman named Thompson, killed a Crin soldier with a rock to the head and then used his weapon against his own squad. This is not normal behavior, I kept repeating into my recorder. This level of persistence is not documented in any species. Theeks was no longer confident. He was angry and frustrated, and possibly beginning to fear these strange mammals who would not stop. On the second night of the ridge defense, the Crin launched what was supposed to be the final assault. Everything they had, all at once. Overwhelming force. The humans could possibly hold. That's when Holloway got shot. I saw it happen through the drone feed. A Crin energy weapon, direct hit to his chest. The impact threw him backwards. His armor sparked and melted. He went down hard and did not move. His squad was screaming on the comms, human voices filled with grief and rage, which I was learning was a very bad combination when it came to this species. They fought even harder, if such a thing was possible, driving back the Crin assault through sheer fury. But Holloway was dead. I saw the hit. I saw him fall. I marked his status as killed in action in my report, added him to the casualty list, and felt something I had not expected to feel. Regret. Sadness. This insane human who fought like a creature possessed had earned my respect, and now he was gone. The Crin pulled back. They had taken too many casualties. Theeks was already planning the next assault, but I could see doubt in his eyes. These humans were costing too much. They were supposed to be easy. The human forces held a brief memorial service for their fallen. I monitored the communications, learning about human funeral customs. They spoke about Holloway with affection and grief, talked about his courage, his humor, his dedication to his squad. It was touching in a way I did not expect. Then they loaded his body into a transport with the other casualties and continued fighting, because of course they did. The next Crin assault came at dawn, because military commanders apparently never get tired of dawn attacks. This one was different. The Crin brought incendiary weapons, planning to burn the humans out of their positions. If explosives and energy weapons wouldn't work, fire would. They were not wrong. The fire was effective, terrifyingly effective. The human positions were engulfed in flames hot enough to melt steel, and I started composing the report in my head. Human resistance eliminated an opening barrage. Expected outcome. Then the shelling stopped, and the Crin ground forces advanced. That is when the shooting started. The humans were still there, still alive, still fighting. They came boiling out of bunkers and collapsed buildings like angry insects from a disturbed nest, and they were absolutely furious about being shelled for 2 hours. Who knew mammals could hold grudges so efficiently? I watched through the observation screens as human soldiers, these supposedly fragile creatures, engaged in firefights with Crin troops who outweighed them by 50 kilograms. The humans did not fight like any species I had documented. They did not fall back to defensible positions. They did not attempt to preserve their forces. They attacked. They actually attacked while outnumbered, while outgunned, while their base was still on fire around them. "This is illogical," I muttered, making frantic notes. Theeks looked concerned for the first time. "They should be retreating. Why are they advancing?" Because, as I would learn, humans do not read the manual on how they are supposed to behave. The fighting was brutal. The Crin were trained, disciplined, and professional. The humans were none of these things. They were creative, unpredictable, and apparently operating on spite and caffeine. I watched one human soldier, yes, it was Holloway, though I did not know his name yet, use a damaged hover vehicle as a mobile barricade, pushing it forward while his squad advanced, firing the entire time. The Crin tried to flank them. Holloway, without any apparent concern for military doctrine or his own survival, grabbed what looked like an explosive charge, sprinted directly at the flanking force, and threw it into their midst. The explosion sent Crin soldiers flying. Holloway did not even slow down. He just kept running, shooting, and apparently having the time of his life. "These creatures are insane," Theeks said.
Then I heard a voice I recognized, slightly hoarse but definitely alive, say, "What? What is everyone freaking out about?" I pulled up the security feed from inside the human base. There he was, wholly walking, talking. His chest was bandaged. He looked like he had been through a fire, which he had, but he was absolutely, impossibly alive. I rewound my footage from 3 days ago, watched the shot that killed him again. The energy weapon hit, the impact, the fall. He was dead. He had to be dead. Nothing survives that kind of shot, nothing. But there he was, drinking coffee and asking where his rifle was, because apparently even death was not going to separate this human from his favorite weapon. I transmitted an urgent message to my superiors. Previous casualty report requires correction. Sergeant Holloway status alive. Explanation unknown. Request clarification on human biological resilience parameters because nothing in my database covers this. The response I got back was essentially, "Are you sure you are observing correctly?" Yes, I was sure. I was watching a dead man drink coffee and complain about the quality of the medical bay. Holloway was not cleared for duty. The human doctors were adamant. He had been clinically dead for 3 minutes. 3 minutes without oxygen to his brain. His heart had stopped. They had resuscitated him, treated severe burns, and were amazed he was alive, much less walking around. Holloway's response was, and I quote, "Yeah, but I feel fine now. Can I have my gun back?" The human doctor said, "No, Holloway needed rest, observation, time to recover." This was sensible. This was logical. This was what any reasonable species would require. Holloway, it turns out, was not interested in being reasonable. That night, he snuck out of the medical bay, retrieved his rifle, and reported to his squad's position on the defensive line. His squad, upon seeing their supposedly dead sergeant appear out of the darkness, nearly shot him. Then they hugged him, then they yelled at him, then they gave him coffee and asked if he was really okay. Human emotional responses are exhausting to catalog. "I am fine," Holloway told them. "Got shot, got better. Let us get back to work." I was listening to all of this with my sensory organs wide open in shock. This was not how biology worked. This was not how anything worked. But humans, I was learning, did not care much about how things were supposed to work. The Crin launched another assault the next day because the Dominion was nothing if not persistent. This attack was different, smarter. They had studied human tactics, adapted their approach, and came in with a coordinated strike designed to exploit human weaknesses. It almost worked. The Crin breached the outer defenses, pushed into the human positions, and for a terrible moment it looked like the end for the garrison. The fighting was close quarters, brutal and chaotic. Holloway's squad was in the thick of it, fighting off Crin soldiers in trenches that had become close-range death traps. And I watched through multiple feeds, trying to track the action, and I saw Holloway do something I still have trouble believing. A Crin grenade landed in the trench. Holloway saw it, had maybe 2 seconds to react, and instead of diving for cover like any sane being, he jumped on it. He jumped on the grenade deliberately to shield his squad from the blast. The explosion should have killed him, should have torn him apart. I recorded his death for the 2nd time, marked him as killed in action again, and started updating my casualty reports.
His squad was screaming. The humans were calling for medics. I was preparing the documentation for my report about how even the most resilient species has limits. Then Holloway stood up. He stood up from a grenade blast that he had jumped on with his own body. His armor was shredded. He was bleeding from multiple wounds, but he was standing, he was conscious, and he was somehow still shooting at Crin soldiers. "Medic," he called out, his voice steady, despite the fact that he should be dead. "I'm gonna need a medic after we clear this position." After? After they cleared the position? This human had just used his body as a grenade suppressor and was planning his medical treatment around completing the mission first. I stopped recording, stopped making notes, just watched in stunned silence as Holloway continued fighting, his squad rallying around him with the kind of ferocious determination that made the Crin assault falter and then break. But the humans held, again, impossibly. When the fighting stopped, I watched the medics work on Holloway, shrapnel wounds across his back and legs, burns, concussion, internal bleeding. The list of injuries was extensive enough that any reasonable being would be dead or comatose. Holloway was arguing with the doctor about whether he needed surgery right away or if it could wait after the next expected attack. The doctor, a grizzled human named Fletcher, apparently had dealt with Holloway before. "You are going into surgery now, Sergeant, or I will sedate you and drag you there myself." "That seems aggressive," Holloway replied, then passed out from blood loss. They operated on him in a field hospital while Crin artillery started shelling the valley again. I listened to the surgical teamwork, their calm professionalism while explosions shook the building. They pulled out 17 pieces of shrapnel, repaired internal damage, and patched him back together. "He will live," Dr. Fletcher announced, after 8 hours of surgery, "but he's done fighting, at least for this deployment, maybe forever. His body has taken too much damage." I filed this report with a sense of relief. Holloway had survived again against all probability, but at least now he would be evacuated, sent somewhere safe. His war was over. I should have known better. 2 days later, while still recovering from surgery, while supposedly under strict medical supervision, Holloway disappeared from the medical facility. Where did he go? Back to his squad, back to the defensive line, back to fighting. The human command structure had what I can only describe as a collective breakdown. Orders were issued. Holloway report back to medical immediately. This was not a request. This was a direct command from a superior officer. Holloway's response, transmitted over open comms for everyone to hear, was simple. "Respectfully, sir, my squad needs me. I'll report back when we're done here." The commander, a colonel named Hayes, tried several more times to order Holloway back. Each time, Holloway politely declined. His squad backed him up, saying they needed their sergeant and they would make sure he didn't push himself too hard. This was mutiny by any military standard, the refusal of direct orders. But Hayes, after attempting to pull ranks several more times, eventually gave up. Fine, keep your insane sergeant, but if he dies out there, I'm not explaining it to his family." "I won't die, sir," Holloway replied cheerfully. "I tried that twice already this week. Didn't stick." Human humor is very dark sometimes. The Crin assault came that afternoon. They had brought up their heaviest weapons, determined to end this once and for all. The bombardment was more intense than anything before. The entire valley shook with explosions. Monitoring equipment failed. Communication lines went down. It was total devastation. When the shelling finally stopped, I thought surely nothing could have survived. Surely this time, finally, the humans were done. The Crin advanced in force, thousands of soldiers moving through the smoking ruins of what had been the human defensive positions. This was it, the end. I prepared my final report on the human garrison. The shooting started before the Crin even reached the main positions. The humans were still there, still fighting, and they were very, very angry about being shelled. Near the end, what followed was less a battle and more of a brawl. Humans fighting from collapsed bunkers, ambushing from rubble, using destroyed vehicles as cover. They had no cohesive defensive line anymore, just scattered positions of soldiers who refused to quit. And in the middle of it all was Holloway, leading his squad in a fighting retreat through the ruins, making the Crin pay for every meter of ground. I watched him through fragmentary feeds, appearing and disappearing in the smoke and fire. He had been shot, burned, and blown up multiple times in the last week. He should be dead several times over, but there he was, fighting with the kind of determination that made me question everything I knew about biological limits. The Crin pushed deeper, the human perimeter contracted. It looked like the end. It had to be the end. Nothing could change this outcome. That's when the human reinforcements arrived. 2 companies of human marines dropped from orbit in combat pods that screamed through the atmosphere like falling meteors. They hit the ground behind the Crin lines and immediately attacked, catching the Dominion forces in a pincer. The battle turned into a rout, the Crin suddenly surrounded and facing enraged human soldiers from all sides, broke and ran. The siege was over. I watched the aftermath in a daze. The human casualties were enormous, but the damage to their base was catastrophic. By any reasonable metric, they should have lost this battle days ago. But they won. Through stubbornness, through refusal to accept reality, through sheer bloody-minded determination, they won. And Holloway, he was sitting on a piece of rubble, drinking water and making jokes with his squad. His uniform was torn and bloody. He had bandages everywhere. But he was alive, and he was smiling. I transmitted my final report to the council. It was not the clinical analysis I was supposed to provide. It was more of a confused rambling about human resilience and my complete inability to explain what I had witnessed. The response came back 3 days later. A new assignment. The council wanted more information about human military capabilities. I was to continue observing, this time embedded directly with human forces. They assigned me to Holloway's unit. Of course they did, because apparently my superiors have a sense of humor. When I arrived at the human base for my new assignment, Holloway was there to meet me. He was out of the medical bay, finally cleared for duty despite the protests of every doctor on the base. "So, you're the observer who's been documenting all our fights," he said, looking me over with curiosity. "Hope we gave you something interesting to write about." Interesting? He called it interesting? This human had been shot, burned, and blown up.
We dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Corvin system and began the careful approach. Stealth ships running silent, trying to avoid the extensive sensor networks that protected the planet. For 2 days, we drifted closer. And I had to admit the human pilots were very good. We avoided detection, slipped past patrol routes, and entered orbit without triggering any alarms. The insertion was done through high-altitude drops, each soldier in an individual pod, falling through the atmosphere towards the landing zone. I was strapped into my own pod, my recording equipment secured, preparing to document what would likely be my last mission as an observer. "Nervous?" Holloway asked over the comm system. His pod was right next to mine in the drop bay. "I am a non-combatant observer documenting a suicide mission," I replied. "What do you think?" "Fair point," he paused. "Look, Voran, I know this seems crazy, but we have done crazier things. Trust me. You died twice on Draxus 9. Yeah, but I got better twice. That is a perfect record. Human logic is an oxymoron. The drop was everything I feared, and worse. Screaming through the atmosphere in a metal coffin, watching the heat shields glow, wondering if the Crin sensors would spot us, praying to deities I did not believe in that we would make it to the ground. We made it, all 50 pods. Perfect insertion. For a moment, I dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, this mission would actually succeed. We landed in a forested area 20 kilometers from the target facility. The pods were camouflaged and abandoned. The team assembled quickly and efficiently, and within 10 minutes we were moving through the forest in complete silence. Captain Alvarez led the way with Holloway's squad on point. I stayed in the middle of the formation, trying to keep up with humans who moved through rough terrain like it was a casual stroll. My species evolved on a lower gravity world. This planet was exhausting. We covered 15 kilometers in 4 hours. Not a word spoken, just silent movement through hostile territory. I was impressed, despite myself. When humans wanted to be quiet, they could be quieter than ghosts. Then we hit the first patrol, a Crin scouting party. 12 soldiers walking right into our path. There was no time to hide, no time to evade. We were spotted immediately. What happened next took less than 30 seconds. The humans moved with such speed and coordination that I barely tracked it. Suppressed weapons, precise shots, and the entire Crin patrol was down before they could transmit a warning. "Clear," Holloway reported quietly. "No alarm sent. We are still good." We continued moving. Stepping over Crin bodies like this was routine for these humans. It probably was. The facility came into view as the sun was setting. It was enormous. A sprawling complex of buildings and defensive structures covering several square kilometers. Walls, guard towers, sensor arrays.
and enough soldiers to garrison a small city. We were supposed to sneak into that. Captain Alvarez called the team leaders together for a quick briefing. I listened in, recording everything. "We breached the perimeter here," she said, indicating a point on her tactical display. "Weak spot in the sensor coverage. Once inside, we split into 3 teams. Alpha team takes out the power station. Bravo team secures the command center. Charlie team, that is us, goes for the weapon itself and plants the charges." "What about extraction?" someone asked. Alvarez was quiet for a moment. "If we complete the mission, extraction teams will be waiting at these coordinates. If we do not complete the mission, extraction doesn't matter because we will all be dead along with everyone else when that weapon activates." The humans nodded like this was perfectly reasonable planning. The infiltration began at midnight. Using equipment I did not fully understand, the humans cut through the perimeter fence without triggering the sensors. We slipped inside, moving between patrol routes, avoiding guard posts. 50 people sneaking through one of the most secure facilities in the sector. It worked for exactly 20 minutes. Then someone spotted us. A Crin guard on a routine check, right place at the wrong time. He saw us, reached for his comm, and died before he could transmit. But the damage was done. His missed check-in would trigger an alarm within minutes. "Double time," Alvarez ordered. "We have maybe 5 minutes before this place locks down." We ran. So much for stealth. The team split up, racing for their objectives, trying to complete the mission before the entire facility came down on our heads. Holloway squad, my assigned unit, was part of Charlie team heading for the weapon facility. We sprinted through corridors, past storage areas, taking down scattered Crin soldiers who were still confused about what was happening. Then the alarms went off. Every light in the facility turned red. Last doors started closing. We heard the sounds of Crin forces mobilizing throughout the complex. "Faster," Holloway urged. "We need to reach the weapon bay before they seal it." We made it with seconds to spare, sliding under a descending blast door that would have cut us in half. On the other side was a massive chamber, and in the center of it was the weapon. I recognized the design immediately. A planet cracker, a device that could destabilize a world's core and tear it apart from the inside. If the Crin completed this, they could destroy entire systems. "Plant the charges," Captain Alvarez ordered. "We have maybe 10 minutes before the Crin breach this chamber." The demolition specialist, a quiet human named Park, went to work, setting explosive charges around the weapon's power core. The rest of us set up defensive positions at the entrances, preparing for the inevitable assault. It came faster than expected. Crin soldiers poured through every access point, and suddenly we were in a firefight in close quarters. The humans held their positions, their training and experience showing as they methodically cut down attackers. I crouched behind a console, recording everything, watching humans fight with a precision that contradicted their reputation for chaos. They covered each other, called out targets, moved like parts of a single organism. Holloway was everywhere, directing fire, filling gaps in the defense, somehow keeping track of everything happening at once. I understood why his squad followed him. He led from the front, took the same risks he asked of them, and never asked them to do anything he would not do himself. "Charge set," Park called out. 5-minute timer. We need to leave now. "All back," Alvarez ordered. Controlled retreat to the extraction point. We ran again, fighting as we went. The Crin were everywhere now, the entire facility mobilized. We took casualties. 3 humans fell in the first corridor, 2 more at a checkpoint. The team was bleeding, but we kept moving. We emerged into the main courtyard, between us and the perimeter fence where we entered, between us and escape. Except now there were approximately 200 Crin soldiers between us and freedom. "Oh, that is not good," someone muttered. "Alternate route," Holloway asked. "No time," Alvarez replied, checking her tactical display. "We have 3 minutes before those charges blow, and we are still inside the blast radius. So we go through them," Holloway said, like this was obvious. "Through 200 soldiers?" I could not help but interject. "That is impossible." Holloway looked at me, and he was smiling, actually smiling. "You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means." Then he charged, just started running directly at 200 enemy soldiers, firing as he went. His squad, because they were all apparently insane, charged with him. The rest of the strike team had maybe 2 seconds to decide. Follow the crazy humans or stay behind and die when the facility exploded. It wasn't really a choice. We all charged. What followed was less a battle and more controlled chaos. The humans hit the Crin line like a hammer, not trying to fight everyone, just punching through, creating a gap. We took casualties. More humans fell, but the momentum carried us forward, through the Crin formation, towards the perimeter. I ran in the middle of it all, my recording equipment clutched to my chest, watching humans die to buy seconds for the rest of us to escape. They did not hesitate, did not question, just fought and died so others could live. We hit the perimeter fence. Some humans went over, some went through, some just blasted holes and ran. The Crin were right behind us, firing, pursuing, and somewhere behind us that weapon facility was about to explode. "Run," Alvarez was shouting, "just run." We ran through the forest, away from the facility, as fast as our legs could carry us. I lost count of how many were still with us, just focused on running, on escaping, on surviving the next few seconds. The explosion, when it came, was everything we hoped for, and more. The weapon detonated, taking the entire facility with it. The shockwave knocked us down, sent trees flying, turned night into day for a brief, terrible moment. I lay on the ground, my audio sensors ringing, my visual inputs filled with white light, wondering if I was dead. Then I heard voices, human voices, counting off, checking in, confirming I was still alive. We had lost 23 people, 23 humans who would never go home, but 27 of us survived, including Holloway, Alvarez, and by some miracle, myself. The extraction took 2 hours. Human ships swooped in under cover of the confusion, picked us up, and jumped to hyperspace before the Crin could organize a response. We had done it, completed the mission, destroyed the weapon, survived. In the transport back to Pinnacle Point, I sat next to Holloway. He was bandaged again, had taken shrapnel from the explosion, but was alive and already making plans for the next mission. That was the most insane thing I have ever witnessed, I told him. That was Tuesday, he replied. Wait until you see what we do when things get really difficult. I looked at this human, this impossible creature, who had been shot, burned, blown up multiple times, and kept coming back for more. I thought about all the humans I had watched, their stubbornness and courage, and absolute refusal to accept defeat. Holloway, I said carefully, why do you keep doing this? You could request safer assignments. You have more than earned it. He was quiet for a moment, looking at the surviving members of his squad. Because someone has to, he said finally. Because if people like us do not stand up and fight, then who will? Because every mission we complete, every weapon we destroy, every battle we win, means someone back home gets to live in peace for another day. Even if it kills you, especially if it kills me. He looked at me directly. That is the deal, Voran. That is what soldiers do. We go into the dark places so others do not have to. We face the impossible so everyone else can sleep safely. And yeah, a lot of us don't come back, but the ones who do, we make sure their sacrifice meant something. I had no response to that. What could I say? This was what humans were. Not the strongest species, not the smartest, not the longest lived, but the most determined, the most stubborn, the ones who would stare down impossible odds and charge anyway, because someone had to. We returned to Pinnacle Point to a hero's welcome. Command was ecstatic. The mission had succeeded beyond expectations. The Crin superweapon was destroyed, their plans in shambles. The war effort had been given new life. Holloway and his squad were decorated, given medals for valor, and immediately assigned to the next impossible mission, because apparently, success is rewarded with more chances to die horribly. I submitted my report to the Galactic Council. It was substantially different from my earlier observations. I wrote about human capability, their tactics and technology, but mostly I wrote about their character, their willingness to sacrifice, their refusal to quit, their absolute certainty that even when facing impossible odds, they could still make a difference. The Council's response surprised me. They wanted more observations, wanted me to continue documenting human military operations. They were beginning to understand, as I had, that humans were unlike any species they had encountered before. I accepted the assignment, of course. Someone had to document these insane mammals. Might as well be me. Besides, I had grown attached to Holloway and his squad. Hack bonding, humans called it. Apparently it was contagious. 3 weeks later, I was back on Pinnacle Point, preparing for another deployment. I found Holloway in the same training bay, running the same drills, preparing for the next mission. Observer Voran, he greeted me with genuine warmth. Back for more. Apparently I have not learned my lesson about staying away from humans who get shot repeatedly. And he laughed. Come on, we are shipping out in 4 hours. Captain Alvarez has a new mission, something about infiltrating a Crin command station. That sounds suicidal. Yeah, probably, but someone has to. I followed him,